There we go. All right, boys. We're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene today.
There we go. That looks
Yep, it works now.
looks promising.
We're up now.
Dope. Dope sauce.
So, here's what we should do is... are you able to log into our Tonic Accord Facebook? Like, not your personal, but the Tonic Accord Facebook, and just post we're live with the Twitch link?
I actually did a little bit ago. Yes.
Okay, sweet. Okay.
I think. Let me make sure it posted, but I think I did.
I see it
Yes.
I see it as you. I see it as you.
Check the. Oh, you're right. It does say published by Alex Jake. Interesting.
Yeah.
Dang, I never knew it did that. I don't.
Oh, published by Alex Jake. Oh, okay. I see that. All right.
Yeah, there's. I think it still shows Tonic Accord post, but then under it says published by Alex Jake
Yeah,
or something
I see
like that.
Okay.
It's kind of weird, but whatever.
Okay. Cool. All right, then dope.
Let's do it.
All right, yeah, let's do it. So let's do it. We're doing Gamestop first, right?
Sure. That sounds
Okay.
good to me.
I'll intro this bad boy.
Yes, please do.
All right, you ready? Whenever you're
Yeah.
ready. Okay, cool.
Yep, let's do it.
Recording in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tonic Accord. This has probably been one of the craziest weeks I've ever seen in regards to news, politics, and just stuff happening in the world. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the GameStop short squeeze. Now, this is not normally an investing kind of channel. I mean, we're talking about it because there's actually a lot of big political implications, and it's a phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon we all witnessed happen within a week, and we just wanted to kind of give you an update and maybe kind of what it means for the political sphere and what even is a short squeeze. So we'll dive into all that and more on this episode of the Tonic Accord. All right, so hi, Alex. I'm sure that you, along with many others, have heard about this GameStop short squeeze or the stock skyrocketing. And before we dive deep into it, I do need to kind of cover some like investing 101 terms, because there's a lot of things going out here that people may not be familiar with, like what is a short squeeze. And so I'll do it super quick if I can. Basically what it is GameStop in the last few years has been on a downward trend. It's kind of a dying company, as you can see. I mean, it's hard to tell with this graph, but it's been bumping up and down here if you're watching live, and it all the way down to $3 in 2019. So a lot of major hedge funds, not billionaires, but like hedge funds that are worth billions of dollars, they make money off of investing on other companies and reorganizing companies and restructuring and selling, right? So these hedge funds bet that GameStop stock would go down, and what that means is you're shorting a company. What that means then is you're basically reserving the right to like sell a stock at a shorter price in the future. You're like borrowing shares from your brokerage to then hope that they are worth less in the future, and you pocket the difference. Long story short is you're basically betting that the stock goes down. As the stock goes down, your investment goes up. A lot of these big hedge funds decided to do that against GameStop, who they viewed as a dying company. What happened is a lot of people online on a Reddit called Wall Street Bets and other forums got wind of this, and they found out that almost all, and in fact more than all of the available shares that GameStop had were basically bet against, which means shorted over the period of time. And so they figured that if they bought a bunch of GameStop stock, it would drive the price up and actually screw over these hedge funds that bet against it. Now, when you bet against a stock, when you short it, if you're losing money, you eventually have to cover your position, which is basically buy back stock at a higher price. It's a really complicated stuff. If you do want to learn more about shorting and short selling, I do encourage you get like a more in-depth analysis. There's other YouTube channels for that. We're not an investment channel, but essentially, as the stock of GameStop went up, the hedge funds that were betting against it had to buy more GameStop stock to what's called cover their position, which in turn drove it up even higher. And so at one point, I said a year ago, GameStop stock was at about $3, and at one point it broke like $450 in the last week. Now it's down back to 85, and we're going to talk a little bit about, who's actually getting screwed by this. But essentially, hedge funds bet against GameStop. Online retail traders found out and used that risky position to drive the price up, and for a quick moment made a lot of money and cost the hedge funds billions of dollars. So now, with that in mind, we're going to talk about kind of the fallout and what we've been seeing in the political world as a result of this crazy stock market phenomenon. So I know I just dumped a lot on you guys, but Alex, as someone who's not investing or not a huge retail investor, as someone more of an outsider, what is your take on what's happening?
Well, boy, I think it was you who told me about this about a day before it really started blowing up. And I remember I was sitting at home the next day. We had a huge snowstorm, couldn't leave the house. And I was just watching CNBC and Fox Business all day. And I'm just going, holy crap, we are in a new era of just so many things right now. And I just find it fascinating how people on Reddit can mobilize. That's kind of my first takeaway, is that there was just this true community of, I guess we could say, quote unquote, the little guy who, kind of going off of that, I think I can't deny that it's nice to see this feel-good story of, these just random Reddit investors on stuff like Robinhood, etc., who could just kind of play the system and give these hedge fund managers kind of a taste of their own medicine. And so I think it kind of does show us that, especially younger millennials and Gen Z people, they kind of have a different idea of how to maybe protest the system. And so obviously that's not my the financial angle to it, but in a cultural way, that's kind of what I see, is that it's interesting to see what's happening here more than anything.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that the hub of this activity is from a subreddit, which is a type of a specialized forum on Reddit. That it's called Wall Street Bets. It's something that I've actually been a part of for over a year now. I think it's hilarious. I'm not as a degenerate of a retail gambler as these guys, but I follow it, for the memes, for the culture. I just enjoy investing memes and stuff like that. So I've seen this grow for a while now. The sentiment that, in my opinion, this whole idea of that this is a revolution and it's anti-hedge funds and it's a political statement is relatively new. If you go on Wall Street Bets, man, it's a lot of just, and part of my French, it's a lot of dumbasses just trying to gamble for money. The culture of Wall Street Bets has not had a long-term political bent. In fact, pretty apolitical, pretty much just, let's just make memes and make money and laugh about it. So I think what happened, though, is when they started to realize that what they were doing with GameStop was screwing hedge funds, it started to gain this political bent. And then what happened is when Robinhood limited trading, along with other brokerages, these are basically applications and, financial institutions that people utilize to do stock trading. So you go through Robinhood to then buy stocks, not just on your own. And these brokerages limited GameStop trading, and under the guise of, we want to minimize risk of our customers. But a lot of people associate it with, you're actually protecting the hedge funds, because if you limit trading, you're limiting the amount of people that want to buy, which will definitely drive a stock price down. So a lot of people were accusing Robinhood of market manipulation. Why was there this accusation that they were helping the hedge funds? Is because Melvin Capital lost 53% of its investment portfolio in January alone, hurt by GameStop and other bets, right? This is coming from the Wall Street Journal. That's one of these hedge funds that lost a ton of money. You can see here that on Wall Street Bets, they were saying only 47% to go. They hate these guys. They were making fun of them for losing all this money. So a larger, massive, big company investment firm called Citadel bailed out Melvin with $2.75 billion. Citadel is one of the main shareholders of Robinhood. I think they're responsible for a lot of their free flow of stocks. Like, it's hard. Again, this gets really into the weeds, but when I buy a stock on Robinhood, I'm basically telling Robinhood, like, they have their own pool of stocks. I'm basically buying it from them. If they need to get another stock, they buy it from a clearinghouse, and that, like, they're the ones that see the actual trades of the stocks. So there's a bunch of different layers here. And so one of the layers is Citadel has a big stake in Robinhood, and Citadel also has a big stake in Melvin Capital, which lost a ton of money to GameStop. So when Robinhood limited trading, a lot of people felt that they were they were basically doing it to save their hedge fund buddies.
Yeah. And, I mean, just like as an outsider and kind of a dumbass in this stuff, my first kind of takeaway is just the moving pieces, kind of the rotating doors here between these apps, these politicians, which I want to get into in a little bit,
yes, and,
Wall Street business. And so, one side of me says, hey, cool, finally, like, this is kind of a peaceful populist revolt. Like, the storming of the Capitol was obviously horrible, but this is almost like a kind of evolution of that, in a sense. Obviously, don't misquote me on that, but it's a sense of trying to put a middle finger to the system, but without violence. But then at the same time, like, I think that really either side, the fact that either side, if you're talking about the hedge funds or these just small investors from stuff like the Wall Street bets, either way, I don't like the fact that you can just either throw money into something or not, and it can completely change the whole ecosystem of the markets, right? Like that to me, either side, if you're on the side of the hedge funds or of the Wall Street bets crew and the Redditors, either side to me, I don't like the precedent of you can just uproot a market like this. And yeah, on the Robinhood thing, though, I do think that's quite alarming. And you mentioned market manipulation, and I was just reading up a little bit before we started recording, and there's an interesting article by Bloomberg that said market manipulation is like pornography. You know it when you see it. And they basically talked about how it would be hard to really get either side of this really for market manipulation, because it's one of these controversial laws where you can't really define it, because by doing so, you might call out the other side. So it's like, basically, like, what I'm trying to say here, again, dumbass trying to explain this, is that, like, you could look at, like, Citadel and Robinhood for this type of stuff, but then at the same time, you could look at the Wall Street bet side for this. So it's like, do you really want to start pointing fingers and digging into this? I don't know. But again, I think it shows how volatile everything really is at the end of the day.
Well, I think we should dig into this, because what Wall Street bets is, like, I certainly understand how someone would be, like, worried that, like, a trend on Reddit could actually make, because, I mean, let's be real, like, Wall Street bets here, let's see, has 8.3 million subscribers. And before this whole GameStop nonsense, it was about 2 million. So they've gained 6 million people in the last week on their forum. That's a lot of people with potential to buy. So I could understand how people are like, hey, we got to be careful about pump dumps. You know what I mean? But pumping, like where you try and get a bunch of people to pump a stock and then you dump it first, so that you're basically manipulating people to raise your stock price out of hype. Pumping and dumping is illegal. And but it's also not. It's not new. It's not like Wall Street Bets is the first place that this has happened. Well, pumping and dumping has been around since the internet has been around. And I think that you have to look at, like, what actually happens, because if you start saying that someone posting on Reddit that, hey, I like this stock, is now market manipulation, right? Like, that's a slippery slope, because it's like, how is that any different than someone from one of these hedge fund managers going on the news and saying, hey, we're downgrading this stock to a lower tier? I mean, what does that mean? That just means they think it sucks. That doesn't mean anything actually. When you hear stuff about, like, blah, blah, blah was downgraded, that's just someone's opinion. But that could actually move that stock down 4 or 5% in a day if the right people say it sucks. If Warren Buffett said, this stock stinks, it would literally go down that day. And that kind of power, like, happens all the time when people go on, like, CNBC and say what they believe about a stock. I don't see how that is any different of someone on Reddit. Now, like,
totally.
So it's like, where do you point the finger? I mean, the thing is, it's like, where do you point the finger? Is it the them or them? It's like, yeah, well, we should have been pointing the finger at the inside traders and the hedge fund managers shorting stocks to manipulate them for years, right?
Right.
And in fact, there was, for a short amount of time after the 2008 financial crisis, there was a cap on you could not short a company for more stocks than there were out of floating around. Again, this is another tough one to explain, but that's the case with GameStop. Was they were literally borrowing against more shares than that even existed in the hopes that they would go down. Like, it was what's called 141% of the float was shorted. So for basically, and if that doesn't make sense in your mind, that's correct. It should not make sense in your mind. That's why it's such a risky and an incredibly atrocious thing that these hedge funds did, which was like they bet against the stock so much that they like literally bet against more than even existed, which is hard to explain. But that's why it was targeted as, they are shorting the living crap out of the stock. All we have to do is just pump it a little, and this thing's going to fly, and which is what happened last week. So now, we talked a little bit about, let's talk more about the political implications. Last week when Robinhood stopped trading, that was a big thing where all the calls against market manipulation came out, and we saw a really interesting thing happen, which was a very bipartisan or even completely nonpartisan outcry against what happened. You had figures like Ted Cruz, AOC, Mark Cuban, Elon Musk, Rush Limbaugh and Bernie Sanders all saying the same thing, which was it was a crime that there's manipulation against the small guy and the retail investor. What do you make of that?
Okay, well, first I want to say one more thing about market manipulation really quick.
Absolutely.
Was all I was saying is that from this SEC official from this Bloomberg article, all he was saying is that it's kind of a lost cause in prosecuting either side in this.
Sure. Okay.
Because market manipulation is really in the eyes of the beholder. So I'm like, obviously, what these hedge funds are doing, I would agree with you, is market manipulation. But then again, like if they looked into what the language of some of these Redditors were, they could also say the same. That's all I'm saying, is that like it would just get convoluted, and clearly the system is probably the problem more than in any individual cases. So that's kind of like how I feel about this. But actually, yeah, going into politics, I mean, I kind of see there is a divide between the establishment and the populace. Obviously that's been going on for a long time, but again, this kind of just shows that to me, is that because all the people you listed practically are people I would consider kind of anti-establishment for the most part. And the people that have been silent are, a lot of corporations. I haven't heard a lot of people inside of the Biden administration talk, because Janet Yellen, for example, who is actually going to probably be recusing herself from any part of this investigation, because she was getting, I think, close to $1 million in speaking fees from Citadel. So while we're seeing, people like, I don't know, if we're seeing people like Bernie Sanders and AOC speaking out, that makes sense to me, because Ted Cruz, Rush Limbaugh, I'm sure the Trumpian types all support this, right?
Right.
But then at the same time, I think that if you're, I don't want to like blame the Clintons or something, but just like an example is like, I think if you're like a Hillary Clinton-esque person, or a George Bush or something, like you're probably not too happy about this happening. And like I've noticed at the Biden administration in press conferences when they've been asked about it, there hasn't been a lot of responsiveness to it. Like Psaki, I think a couple days ago, was asked about it, and she kind of diverted the question to how they had the first woman running one of these investigations into it. And I'm like, that's not the point here. Like, you guys are diverting the question. I think it's really going to be interesting to see how the establishment politicians, because I mean, honestly, Biden's administration, in my opinion, is very establishment. Yeah. And I'm curious to see, I think this could be a breaking line into what they actually do going forward in terms of this stuff. Because like I said, Janet Yellen is probably going to be recusing herself from looking into this, the situation inside of the SEC, just because of her connections. So while I think it's cool to see AOC and Ted Cruz and people like that agreeing right now, because I think we need more of that, I also think that the silence from a lot of the more wealthy establishment types is also telling.
Yes, 100%. You could tell who's like trying to go in on the populist thing, and for different reasons. Right, Gogos. I almost made $1 million, but I didn't buy, unfortunately. As I said, the fear of missing out can be real. Are you on the left or the right? That's a little bit of a bifurcation, but I lean a little left. He leans a little right. We like to try and meet in the middle. We have a lot of varying opinions on different things, though, so it's hard to pin us down. You can, if you really want to get an idea, we have a YouTube video where we take political compass tests. But back to this. The political thing was really interesting because it's Wall Street has gotten a bad rep. Back to Occupy Wall Street thing. For a long time, you could hear this. Like the guy, the liberal kid in Seattle with the purple hair hates Wall Street, right? But we've also known for years that the guy with the pickup truck in the South who doesn't invest and feels that he's been left out of the global economy. I imagine he blames Wall Street as well, and that's why you have people like Rush Limbaugh, having a populist message against hedge funds is because that's in line with what some people think. And you're right that I wonder if Wall Street will kind of be another punching bag again, similar to the Occupy Wall Street again. And I want to see what comes out of this. Interesting point you said about the mainstream people though, like Mitch McConnell, or Kelly Loeffler or Joe Biden, who have a lot of connections with Wall Street.
Right.
This is going to be kind of a litmus test. I know that I think it was last week. It was very vague, but as the squeeze was really happening, like at the 400 mark, the Biden administration did say that they were looking into it, whatever the hell that means. But it was a little bit telling. Like, are they going to have the retail investor in mind? Are they going to have the hedge funds in mind? The SEC has said when they're going to look into it, and they vowed to protect their retail investor. Who knows again what that will actually look like. But it certainly does kind of put some people, especially Joe Biden, in a sticky situation because, does he come out with some big regulations against the stock market? I mean, and then risk upsetting his buddies who maybe donated to his campaign, or does he risk, limiting a stock market recovery? Right? There's a lot of big questions to this, but I think one, like part about real actual change, I think it should be illegal to short sell a company over 100% of the float. Again, this is a weird kind of convoluted thing, but over 100% of GameStop's shares were like lended out to short, which is just crazy. So that should just be legal because, again, one of the things you have to remember when you short a company is infinite risk. I want to explain really quick. Have an interesting question for the panel? Sure, man. Go ahead and ask it. Hopefully we can get to it in a sec. So I want to talk about like risk versus reward, right? If you're just a basic investor with $1,000 and you invested in GameStop, the most you can lose is $1,000. If the stock could go down to zero, which would be rare, but you could just lose 1,000 to zero, and that's it. But you could actually get an infinite amount of profit if the stock goes up and up and up and up, right? So you can only lose 10,000, but you can make who knows that much. Whereas on the reverse, which is the guys betting against GameStop with the short, they have the potential to lose way more money than their initial investment because remember, if the stock goes up, their investment goes down, and there's no zero to kind of cap that out. The stock could just go up forever, and so they could actually owe on interest as well. An amazing amount of money. And that's what happened. That's why these bets are so risky. And that's why these hedge funds lost 53% of their value in January, because there was an infinite amount of risk involved with their bet.
Yeah. And, if we had a more transparent banking and finance system in the United States of America,
yes,
I would hope that maybe people would be discouraged on both sides for doing this, because to be completely honest, I think, again, like I said, I think it's a feel-good story, and I kind of like to see people putting it to the system. It's just kind of intrinsically what I think. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, these hedge funds, they're prepared for this at the end of the day. And I do worry that some of these small independent investors really could lose in the big run.
Oh, and it's already happening.
Yeah, exactly. And so, obviously, it's a good look. It's a great photo. It's, it's happening right now. But in a couple weeks, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, GameStop's already back below $100. It peaked at like 400 and something.
Right.
If you got in on the hype on Friday and bought at 350, you're down a lot. It's down to $85 a share right now. So people are already getting screwed. Some people, if you look at Wall Street bets, man, they're still in this. The whole meme is hold the line. Will it jump back up if shorts need to cover their position? Maybe. But I think that now it's not even a coin toss if it goes up or down. I think now you're going against market manipulation. You're going against Robinhood limiting buys. You're going against you're going against the house, right? You're playing against the house at this point because they're stacking the deck against you. There's even another thing called short laddering, where these hedge funds actually trade back and forth with each other in a pre and after market to drive the price down. That's something that you can look at if you look at like NASDAQ live trades. A lot of people, like if you look at Wall Street Bets, people are tracking this stuff. Now, I'm not saying everything I'm hearing is true, but it seems like there's a lot of cards stacked against the retail trader now. And so if you're out there thinking, can I still get in on this? I would suggest no. I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you what to do, but it seems like the squeeze is Squoze. And so
one thing in there really quick. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, while you're on that, it's interesting because in the last day, silver is just soaring, right? And to me, it seems like a lot of people are like, especially the media, are basically saying like silver's the next potential short squeeze. But my worry is that there's a lot of big companies and big hedge funds invested in it. So is it like kind of a false flag, or is it trying to lead people to another one that actually could hurt them? Because I've seen online a little bit, and I know like some podcasters and YouTubers are talking about how don't buy silver, don't rally behind it, even though like I was watching CNBC yesterday and they were talking about, Pan American Silver, wheat and precious metals, they're up, buy them. And a lot of more conspiratorial minded people, so if you put on your tin hat for a second, they think this is just kind of a false flag or a lie to kind of get them to get screwed over. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I've heard that. I mean, look, I don't know where that whole thing, because I saw the articles that was like Reddit pushes another is silver Reddit's next GameStop. And again, go on Wall Street Bets, man. They're not talking about silver at all. They even say they're the ones that are saying that like they're all trying to get us to buy silver for some reason. We don't want to buy silver. We're in GME. I mean, you can just look at the culture of this website, man. Like these guys are gonna hold GameStop until they freaking die. And Mark Cuban didn't ask me anything on the subreddit today, and he even said to hold, which was crazy in my opinion. But it's getting very cult-like, and I don't see them talking about silver at all. They're talking about GameStop and AMC and maybe a little bit of Nokia, but it's pretty much GameStop all the way. So are these guys going to get burned? I don't know. I do think it. Again, if these guys shorted GameStop at $10, even though it's down to 85, these hedge funds are still losing billions. And again, they're paying on interest because they're actually like renting these stocks. So the big squeeze is probably done. These hedge funds are still going to be bleeding unless they cover their position. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on. They definitely did take the fight to Wall Street, but I'm hesitant to say that it will make lasting change. I'm pretty sure, one, most of Wall Street wasn't in on GameStop, so they were probably fine. And two, they're going to do things to make their money back and screw the retail trader over anyway. It's just going to take a little longer now. And they might. And the good thing, though, is maybe they'll stop shorting companies. Like maybe they'll stop shorting companies this much and really trying to screw over companies that are on their last breath. I know that if I was one of the head guys at Melvin or Citadel, I would lay off the shorts for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd put back on the long johns and lay off the shorts because this was just kind of crazy.
One more political question for you. It looks like Biden's cabinet pick for the SEC chairman has been delayed. He's Gary Gensler. And the Hill reports that he basically might be needed to break a partisan 2-2 split. So, like, A, do you think that could be bad? And B, do you think they should investigate things like Robinhood?
I think they should. I think they should investigate it. I mean, like, again, I think that if you have a coordinated effort by a brokerage firm to limit buying in order to save its own like hedge fund buddies, I mean, that is market manipulation, right? That's 100% market manipulation. So I think it should be investigated. I don't know if that is the case. I'm not saying that is the case, but it looks a little fishy. So I think it should be investigated. I know that the Robinhood CEO is actually set to testify or just speak to Congress in a little over a week, I believe. So we'll see what that's about. I'm sure that people like AOC and others will have some pretty heated questions. I know that AOC has really been trying to champion her movement onto top of this as well. You see a lot of like progressive liberals saying that this is, an obvious example of against any kind of market efficiency hypothesis, right? Not that short squeezes are anything new, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this in the long term. I don't think it's going to be much, though. I really don't think it's going to be some sweeping changes to the market.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. And I would say that this just kind of puts a nail in the coffin, I think, to the idea that the stock market is a good gauge of the health of the nation's economy.
Yeah.
Right. Like the fact that either side could do this in the first place shows me that we should not be using stocks are up or down, dude. So we're all doing well.
Right.
I don't think that should be a gauge of the health of our economic status of average citizens, because obviously it can change overnight with no actual purpose.
Yeah, true that. I mean, there's a very good argument that the stock market is not based in any efficient reality at all, and it is no longer a representation of a real supply and demand. I mean, and GameStop's one of them. But things like this are rare, and I do want to make clear, like, just real quick, that like if we're, investing in the stock market is different than like day trading and gambling with GameStop. So for those out there that are very not, that don't know much about investing, this GameStop thing is not investing. This was gambling. This was just a crazy short squeeze. I recommend that you look into, safer long-term bets, because if you look at the market over decades and decades, it does go up, and it averages about 10 to 15% a year now. So, I am worried that I think a lot of people will get into investing with the GameStop thing, think they're going to make a bunch of money really quick, lose $500 in a day, and then never touch investing again. And it's like, they're very different things. So I do suggest anyone out there to look into long-term investing, be safe, be smart, and make your own decisions.
Yeah, that reminds me of the one time I gambled outside of LA at that like Indian casino. I forget what it's called, but
Pachanga,
something like I put in like $20, lost it, and I'm like, this isn't for me.
yeah. Hey, at least it was 20 instead of 20 million, like some of the people have been put into GameStop. There's a lot. I think we have probably what you think we should probably wrap this one up here.
Yeah, probably.
There's a lot we didn't cover, like characters like DFV, Deep Effing Value, who's now like a meme hero on Wall Street Bets. There's a lot here that we didn't get a chance to cover. Look into it yourself. It's a crazy story. I think Netflix is even going to make a movie about it. But if I were you, I'd stay away from GameStop stock. We'll see what happens, though. I could be wrong. That is this episode of the Tonic Accord. We'll see what kind of political implications this phenomenon has in the future. If you're watching live, stay with us, because we're going to be talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and kind of how we're seeing the next step of Trumpism manifest in politics and what that means for our government. Thank you all for watching and listening to the Tonic Accord. Oh, and thanks to the hard working and efforts of our friend Alex here, we are now on Spotify. So if you prefer to use that platform to listen to us, you want to go on a jog and just have Spotify on, we are now on Spotify. Check it out, the Tonic Accord. Thank you so much for listening.
Ciao.
Okay, dope.
Cool.
That's that one.
Cool.
Dark Sage, man. You asked that question before, man.
That's what I was thinking too.
You came in here a couple weeks ago and asked that question, and it's great that you're in the politics, but again, I'll just tell you the same thing I said last time, which was just think of it as a transaction. Give the people what they want. Don't think of it as some high ideal thing. Find out what the people actually want in your district. Okay, so we're doing. Hold on, let me give me a quick sec. Do you need to take a break?
Yeah, of course.
Or are you good to keep going?
Yeah, I'll run to the bathroom real quick. I'll keep up with my status quo.
Sure. I figured. I was waiting for it.
I was like, maybe I can hold it, but nah.
Okay. Go for it. Okay. Let's see.
Okay. All right. I am good to go whenever.
Sweet. Okay, cool. I just put it the Gamestop squeeze and what it means for U.S. politics. I put that. That's uploading right now to our drive. And then whenever you're ready, I can actually start the recording section for the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I'm good to go.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Recording in 3, 2, 1.
So Trump has left the crazy train circus in Washington, D.C., but there's a new dream team. And of this new dream team, Marjorie Taylor Greene is kind of, I would say, the front runner, the main squeeze. And she is quite a piece because there isn't a conspiracy theory that she doesn't believe in. Don't fact check me on that, but I think it's true. She has harassed Parkland shooting victims, blamed Jewish lasers on the California forest fires, believes in QAnon, has supported killing leaders of the Democratic Party like Nancy Pelosi. And it's just some crazy stuff and kind of alarming if you're a centrist. So today on the Tonic Accord, Drew and I are just going to try to figure out what's up with her and what can we do about her and what's the future of the GOP right now. Hey, Drew, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. This is certainly an interesting topic because we've been talking multiple times about how this Republican Party is going to are they going to reconcile with what happened with Trump? How are they going to move forward? And we're starting to see where different factions lie.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good way to put it, and I've honestly been proven wrong at about every corner. Like every time I'm like, maybe this is it. But unfortunately, it seems like even after Capitol Hill, even after Trump finally, leaving and Biden getting inaugurated, Trumpism seems to be evolving really fast. Yeah. And, like Taylor Greene, she could just be a loon. To me, she seems kind of like the embodiment of Alex Jones, but now she's actually in Congress, But to me, it's her willingness to support violence that is the most terrifying to me. Like, she can talk about Jewish space lasers, which were probably lightning, by the way, because, that can start a fire as well. But anyways, like, it's more terrifying to me that she is so willing to say, like, we need to sacrifice blood to defend our freedoms. She supported killing Nancy Pelosi. She said things are in place to do so. That stuff scares me, man.
Yeah, she's in an interesting position where it almost doesn't matter what she says. And in fact, I think all this attention is helping her. Again, I think I've mentioned this before, is why we see a difference in personality between House of Representatives and senators. One of the reasons is because if you're just a congresswoman from a smaller district, you're only appealing to one maybe more rural Georgia district that's very right wing, whereas a senator has to maintain a popular vote of the entire state, right? So the personalities of House of Representatives are a lot more inflammatory, a lot more like that's how you get people like AOC. That's how you get people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, where they have a district that leans really far one way, and they're been given the agency to have these beliefs, even though it might not be popular on a larger scale. Whereas the Senate, like I said, you have to appeal to the whole state, and you're usually a little slower to adopt hype and fads. So that's one reason we see like the QAnon group is starting out in the House, and that makes sense based on our structure.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's quite like glaring at this point, the difference I think between the Senate and the House. And I mean, I think we really first saw that with the storming at the Capitol back on January 6th, right? Like, you had a lot of senators not completely blame Trump for all of it, but they were more willing to say that he definitely played a part in this. But then on the House side, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a festering extremism, and yeah, kind of going off what you say, because I totally agree with it. I think that it's almost like that's kind of how Republican populism has grown. It's because you say the craziest stuff and you keep saying it, so then it makes the next crazy thing not crazy. Right. It's just this loop, and that's kind of what got Trump elected. That's kind of what got the Tea Party going. That's kind of what got Sarah Palin going. She's just the next iteration of it, I think. But the problem is that she's now saying stuff out in the open that even like Trump didn't really say. Because let's be honest, Trump said lock her up for Hillary, but he never said let's hang Hillary or kill her, right? Like this is much worse. And This kind of goes back to that conversation we had about the paradox of tolerance, where like how much do you tolerate crazy hate speech, because eventually it just kind of goes into the mainstream. And I'm reading right now The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich, long book about just the rise and fall of Hitler.
Sure.
And I have to say, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but this type of demonization and this rhetoric that she specifically is using, these conspiracies that always are centered on a certain group, it's alarming and it needs to be quashed. And I know it's not going to unify the country, because apparently Republicans are all about unifying the country all of a sudden. But I think it's time to get her out of there. They should at least censure her, or at the best remove her, because this is a cancer, as Mitch McConnell called it.
Right.
And it needs to go.
Yeah, again, another example of how the Senate is more willing to crack down on this is, Mitch McConnell said this is a cancer on the Republican Party, which is exactly what I said, and both of us have been saying, is that this QAnon lump is a cancerous tumor on the Republican Party. Again, if I was a Republican strategist, I'd be terrified of people like her, because again, yeah, she might win her seat in Georgia, but she's making a fool out of herself for the whole Republican Party, and it puts someone like Kevin McCarthy in a situation where now he has to decide: do you fully denounce the QAnon part of your party, which is growing, or do you let it fester, and then you risk more Marjorie Taylor Greenes making your overall platform more ridiculous? So, Kevin McCarthy's in a weird position, and I know that you had your catching up about his meeting with Trump. I imagine he didn't even want to take that meeting, but he had to. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Whereas Mitch McConnell's done with Trump. You threaten his life, he says screw you, this is done. I don't even want to talk to you. So the Senate is way more willing to get rid of this, but the House is. Yeah, it's a problem. And I think the thing, like you said, about about unity, is this is what I was saying about, when we talk about unity, we talk about healing, it means actually getting rid of the problem. So unity is not saying, hey, we're all hunky-dory now. Hey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I know you threatened to kill me or wanted to have your supporters behead me, but now we're buddy-buddy. That's not healing. That's not unity. She still wants Nancy Pelosi's head. She just won't say it because she'll get in trouble. But I guarantee you, she hasn't changed her mind about anything. She still starts house stuff. She makes fun of Parkland shooting victims. I mean, it's ridiculous. So even censure, right? Like censure, which is just basically the entire Congress saying, you're an idiot and you don't deserve to be here, but you still have to be because you're elected, right? I still think that would just be a badge of honor for her. I think she would go back to her constituents, and I'm not the first person to have this analysis. I do think it'd be a badge of honor. She'd go back to her constituents and look, the evil Democrat pedophile ring said I'm a bad girl. Isn't that dope? I'm one of you. They can't even take me in Washington. They want to censure me. I'm getting silenced again or whatever. I think it has to come from within, right? It has to be Kevin McCarthy saying we have to stamp this out, but is he will he do it? I don't know. I think though that if I was a Democrat, this is a good thing for the long-term strategy, because she's eating the Republican Party from the inside. She's making an absolute fool of herself with this Jewish laser stuff. I mean, it's a joke. It's a meme. How could any educated, centrist, higher socioeconomic Republican that maybe voted for Biden in Georgia but voted for Trump in 2016, how would they go back to supporting this Republican Party?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she literally just blamed the Rothschilds, who are always the anti-Semitic trope, right? Right. It's so obvious what she's doing. I mean, there's a really disturbing video of when I think it was Ilhan Omar, who I am, believe me, no supporter of, but she went up. She basically tried to organize a protest to say that you aren't actually recognized as a congresswoman because you swore your oath on the Quran and not the Bible. Yeah. So she's a person. She's a religious Christian fundamentalist who also has kind of mixed QAnon into that. And I think you're absolutely correct when you said that unifying and healing means that you first need to, operate on the disease. And sticking with that cancer metaphor, if you have a brain tumor, you don't just deny it and ignore it. You need to get it removed to move on, right? Right. That seems like common sense to me. And let's see, what's his name? Charlie Sykes. He runs the Bulwark podcast, great conservative media, kind of the Never Trump movement. I've kind of found at least someone to listen to that's still a Republican that's not nuts. But he basically said that, even though people think Mitch McConnell's the leader of the Republican Party right now, it's actually Kevin McCarthy. He has a better temperature of the room. You know, he actually understands, unfortunately, what a lot of what a lot of their constituents want. Right? Senate is 6-year terms, more pragmatic, and like you said, the House is much more volatile.
Yeah.
And so, like, but like the thing is, which I do want to get to, is the Republicans do know how to get rid of a malignancy, right?
Yeah.
What was his name? The Iowa guy, Steve King, was
Steve
it?
King, right? The racist
You know,
guy.
yeah, they basically censured him. That's basically what they did, right? They condemned him publicly and removed him from committees, and he kind of just fell away. And so that's why I don't know if I totally agree with you that it would infuel her, because you're right, it would make her a martyr to her base. But I wonder if at the nation as a whole, if they saw that, maybe some of the people who just follow in line would be like, okay, well, she's crazy.
Well, I think she should lose her committee seats. I just think the censure part, like the censure part is just a little slap on the wrist that's like, you're bad. And I think she'd just take that as a badge. I do think, though, that you're right about the committee thing. Like, that's actually the real stuff. We're like, get her off. I mean, she's a freshman. She's a freshman congresswoman, and she was on the budget committee. I mean, that's like the big dog stuff. Like, that's like, if you're on the congressional budget committee, that's like you help decide the actual where the money goes. That usually is not a freshman thing. Like, usually you work up and you wait years to get onto those big budget committees. So I'm not even sure I understand why Kevin McCarthy put her on the budget committee in the first place, but he should take her off. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, she's like even touted 9/11 truth stuff. Like, you're like, oh my God, dude, this is like a YouTube channel in a congresswoman. But I do agree that like the committees, she should be taken off the committees. That's like actual real power being taken away from her.
Right. And no, I mean, actually, yeah, like the more I think about it, I feel like censuring's only really good for the historical context of it, because not Kevin McCarthy. I'm totally spacing. The historic Joseph McCarthy. He was censured in 1954, and I would probably argue that his legacy has quite been tainted, and that probably did help with that, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So like in a historical context, you know, yeah, they could say, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene was censured, blah, blah, blah. But you're right. I think in the here and now, it doesn't really matter. And plus, I was reading, so Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2 of the Constitution just says that each house can determine the rules of how to punish or remove someone. But it takes a 2/3 vote. And let's be honest, in the House, they're not going to get 66% of Republicans to want to kick her out. They're just not.
No, and that brings me back to something you mentioned in your catching up, which was, I think it was 54 or 56 of Republicans still want Trump to run again in 2020.
54, yeah.
54%. So a majority of Republicans want Trump to run again in 2024. That means a majority of Republicans think that he's the best chance they got to take back power as a Republican Party and are on board. And so it's no surprise. It's no surprise that Kevin McCarthy is debating, do I just accept this QAnon thing into the fold? Because a good amount of Republicans are fine with it. That's what's so crazy is like, you know, again, is like Mitch McConnell is trying to lead from the top down. Mitch McConnell is like, this is a cancer, and we're reprehensible, and you know, and he's saying like, you know, Joe Biden won the election, right? The things that I think he should be saying, but he's trying to lead the Republican Party from the top down, whereas Kevin McCarthy, like you just mentioned, is trying to read the room. He's trying to gauge the temperature. And right now the temperature says a majority of Republicans are still on board with this stuff. And back to another conversation we had about the Overton window, Marjorie Taylor Greene is pushing that window. So it's like, hey, well, look, I'm not like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't believe Jewish space lasers started the California wildfires, but I still believe that the election was stolen, which is based in no facts. I still believe that, you know, maybe there's a pedophile ring with the Clintons, but I don't know. Like, she normalizes things that are ridiculous, and she pushes that Overton window. And again, when we talked about the Overton window, it's the idea that you go way out here so that it rubber bands back to here where you really want. And what the Republican Party, you know, or at least her wing of the Republican Party really wants is people to believe that the election was stolen, people to believe that Joe Biden's illegitimate and that Trump still has the power to come back. And they're riding that wave. I can't believe it's I can't believe it's happening. And frankly, I think it's going to be really bad for the Republicans.
Yeah, and on that point, I know earlier you said, yeah, this actually really could be a good strategy for the Democrats, and I agree with you, but I am not happy about that. I am not happy about that at all.
I
Like
know, I know
as
you're not.
someone former conservative, still would probably vote for some conservatives. That's alarming to me. That basically what you're going to see is a fragmented, chaotic Republican Party that can't win any elections on a Senate level, especially. And Warnock's seat back to Georgia, Raphael Warnock, who just beat Kelly Loeffler, he he's going to be a highly contested seat going forward.
Yeah.
And if the Republicans don't change, I don't see them winning any national elections, or not national elections, but bigger elections like that. Because right now I'm seeing, and this is what you touched on, talking about the difference between the House and the Senate. The Republicans have become kind of a rural local party that can't win national elections. And to me, that's not good. I still, like, there are some Republicans that I still full-heartedly believe, but when you're Matt Gaetz, frat boy Gaetz, going to Wyoming, trying to get Liz Cheney removed, and she's ultra conservative. Like, what is this? And so I'm worried that I don't want a single party Democrat ruled country, because there's a lot of executive orders that have already been signed that I don't agree with, and I don't want one party rule. I don't think anyone wants one-sided rule. And so the Republicans need to, honestly, excuse my language, get their effing shit together. Yeah. And Adam Kinzinger, who I quite like, and he's much more right than I am. Like, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but he's actually trying to start a new political action committee that's aimed at supporting Republicans who push back on extremism and misinformation. So I hope to see more of that. There are these guys, but there's just not enough of them, man.
Yeah, and again, as someone who's more liberal, it's not like it's not like I'm happy of the chaos I've seen. Like, again, political strategy wise, it's like, oh man, like the Democrats are in a good place to keep power for like 8 years, but a lot could change, and two is, let's remember that like people have died because of this movement, because of the QAnon movement. People have died and died for stupid causes. So. It's not. It's like the Jewish space laser thing is funny, but what's not funny is the people that died at the Capitol Hill siege, or the threats against Nancy Pelosi's head that are real threats. And the guy, they're still looking for the guy who planted pipe bombs at the different DNC and RNC headquarters. So like, when we say Republicans are playing with fire, I mean literally, or almost literally, they're like playing with real violence and fire, and they're gonna get burned. And again, I want to make very clear that like, this is also part of my idea of like, this is the bed that Republicans have made, and now you're sleeping in it. This is what happens when you allow misinformation to fester. If Republicans should have called out that the election was fair and just a week or two after November. Right? It should have been, hey, let's give Trump maybe a week or two to get through the courts. But as soon as we started to see all these court cases started dying, guys, it's over. But they didn't. They let it spread. And then a few months later, you had a full-on siege. And so it's like, I understand why Mitch McConnell is saying this is a cancer now, but he should have said it earlier. And it's like, dude, you're sleeping in the bed you made.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And like, so I think we talked about him a little bit off the air, but Madison, Cawthorn or whatever?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He looks like Tom Brady mixed with Hitler Youth. I think I told you that, but he said, there's a quote when he was running his campaign. He said, "I have built my staff around communications rather than legislation." And I would argue that's probably all of these freshman Trumpist type of senators, congressmen and women, right? Like, there's no substance to policy. They don't care about the betterment of the nation. It's all about like this conspiratorial messaging. And I agree with you. There was a time and place to put all this out, and it's really too late. And I know, we live in a democracy, and obviously people need to be heard. But it was actually Dan Carlin in his Common Sense podcast who said, if you believe in like every conspiracy and there's no reason and no willingness to negotiate with the other side, should you be allowed to vote? Like should there be a litmus test or at least some baseline, especially for if you're going to run for Congress and you're going to have to work with these other people, or at least in theory work with these other people, but you actually believe they are satanic cannibals too? Should you be allowed to run? Like, shouldn't there be some litmus test, like at least a baseline of who can be in Congress?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing. I mean, again, it's an interesting question. It's a tough one to answer, but it's definitely an interesting question because it is like we haven't seen something like this yet, or at least on this level. So it's like, do we ask things like, man, like if this woman legitimately wants her political like opponents, but also like colleagues at work to die, like should she be allowed to be there? And that's a very legitimate question because people. I think it was. Not Ilhan Omar. There was a congresswoman who I forget her, I'm blanking on the name, but she moved her office away from Marjorie Taylor Greene's office because she felt threatened by her staff berating her without masks on. And you're like, oh my God, like she's a child. What a childish thing to do. Like, you're right that like there has to be limits, and it's amazing that but she's taking the Trump playbook and turning it up to 11. She's getting a ton of free press. She has us talking about her. I imagine her supporters where she's from will double down with her on all this crap. But again, it's just like she's on QAnon. She's on like QAnon Reloaded, and I worry that the Overton window is just like will pull back to just QAnon light, and that's just. I don't know, man. It's just crazy that we're even at this position where someone can believe these things and be elected to our government and represent the United States in a capacity she is.
Yeah, very, very well said. And I always just go back to that. It was the Republican Party that was founded, at the onset of the Civil War. It was the party of the Union. It was the party of freedom, of trying to bring the nation back from the brink. And it's kind of wild now that they're the ones who are putting out cringe conspiracies and the ones that are actually joking about hot civil war. How the tables have turned. And I love how, like, speaking of the Overton window, what it means to be conservative just keeps expanding. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at any of the values of a true fiscal or even religious conservative, they've all been thrown out, man. And Trump was just the icing on the cake for that. But like, if you're a true conservative, and I'm just like, maybe if even one person hears this, like, that could change. Like, think about what it is to be a conservative, and think about what Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump are. And are those compatible? Because I don't think so.
Yeah, I think the only consistent I've seen is the abortion issue. Everything else is free trade. Who knows anymore? You know what I mean? Limited government. Who knows anymore, man? Like that's all up. That's all up in the air with Republicans. The only thing that's consistent is the abortion issue, which isn't going anywhere. But everything else has been thrown out. Like the playbook is completely different.
Yeah.
We'll see how it plays out, man. We'll see how it plays out. I don't think it's a winning strategy. I think Mitch McConnell realizes it's not a winning strategy, and that's why he's against it. But Kevin McCarthy has to make up some big decisions very soon.
Yep. And I'll just wrap up by saying that I hope that he went down to Florida to make some weird deal with Trump where he's like, hey, you can stay involved in the party and we will not, go against you in the impeachment trial, but can you never run again? Like, I wonder if there was some like agreement, like, yo, we're going to leave you alone and let you still, say crazy stuff, but don't run again, man.
Don't run, please.
I hope. But anyways, thanks everyone for listening. We are on Spotify now, so check us out there. I know we had some people asking, so we are there. And again, we're still on the other ones. And we're in 2021. We're in February. To me, it still feels like March of 2020, but, time flies. So take care.
Take care, everyone. Okay. Sweet.
I think two good discussions.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene's a fucking nutcase, man.
Dude, I could just go on and on. And we barely ever get time to talk about Lauren Boebert, who's in her own right a classy gal.
Trying to bring her gun to Congress.
Madison Cawthorn has apparently like holsters in his wheelchair. That's
Wait, really?
Yes, yeah. Apparently, metal detectors have a problem with his wheelchair for a lot of reasons.
Oh my god, dude. Yeah.
Wow. He also said he was qualified for the Paralympics, and then apparently never even tried out.
I heard he trained for it, which was like.
Oh, okay.
It's like, what does that mean? Like, I can say I trained for something and then never do it. Like I could just jog. I could walk a mile a day and be like, oh, I'm training for a marathon. But it's like, okay, but is that a marathon?
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Right, I mean, okay, whatever, dude.
I also like understand why you would want to go to like historic Nazi places for the history's sake, but if you're like Instagramming Führer in those,
Yeah.
kind of a red flag. I don't know.
Yeah, it's those are like a little weird. Like it's a little weird. I give him a pass because he did say like, "Oh, a great evil" and stuff. Like
Right.
I'm not gonna sit there and be like, he is 100% a full blown Führer worshiping Nazi. Like I don't have the evidence for that. But
Yeah.
so that one is just a little sketch where you're just kind of like, that's a weird thing to say, but whatever. But he still is kind of a goofball. Like the whole like virtue signaling about Paralympics and the I have a gun on my wheelchair. Like, okay, dude, whatever, man. Again, it's identity politics for the right. It's the same. It's the same thing as like, look at the first black, secretary of blah blah blah. It's the same thing to be like, look, I'm bringing my gun to Congress. Like, can we just like value people on their legislation, please?
God, I wish I was a gun. Honestly, they get more rights than most people.
Dude.
No.
Okay.